Bounty hunting is a complicated profession. Don't you agree?
The Cinik Radio Podcast.
Hi, I'm Chad L. Coleman, Tyrese from The Walking Dead, and Cuddy from The Wire, and you are listening to the Cinik Radio Podcast. Here are your hosts, Cinik.
Hey, the facts are Spider-Man belongs in the MCU. Sony was delusional thinking they didn't need Marvel, and now he's back. And we, the fans, are 100% proudly responsible for that.
Agree?
As long as DC wants to make dark and gritty movies, they're going to lag behind Marvel in every category.
And Ryan.
Batman vs. Superman is objectively better than Infinity War.
IG, did we just forget Kim?
You guys completely suck.
This is the greatest show of all time.
This is episode 155 of the Cinik Radio Podcast, and I'm your Inquisitor Cinik. See what I did there? And joining me, as always, my Jedi Masters, Igri, Ryan, and Kim. And on this week's show, we've had this one circled on our calendar for as long as I can remember. We are breaking down episodes 1 and 2 of Obi-Wan Kenobi. So, IG, all of us being admittedly huge Star Wars fans, like you covered in Star Wars Tattoo, but we have mixed feelings about the prequels. Do you think the distance and maybe a little bit of nostalgia has kind of smoothed over the rough edges as far as these films?
Oh, absolutely. I think, people have gotten a lot more welcoming to some of the things. I mean, there's always going to be a certain amount of hate, and granted, you can't really compare the prequels with the original trilogy because the original trilogy just did things the prequels weren't able to accomplish, right? With the just amount of fanfare and love and time it spent in the theaters and everything else. But you can't deny that, like, the characters and the way that they were portrayed in the prequels, especially ones that ended up later, like Obi-Wan that we had in the original trilogy, like he was perfectly casted as Ewan McGregor. And getting things like, Hayden Christensen and everything, I've really warmed up to it. I just watched the prequel trilogy again this past week, getting ready for Obi-Wan. So I was, of course, Hayden did some things, but I think that's more about directing than it is his acting. And his turn into Darth Vader was great and everything. So yeah, I mean, you can't deny that there's great characters that don't exist in the original trilogy that are in the prequel trilogy, like Darth Maul and other things. So yeah, I think it's warmed up quite a bit from the prequels. Just, it's been more than 20 years, so a lot more happy with it.
How about you, Ryan? Has time healed old wounds as far as the first 3 movies?
I mean, yeah, I think we're in a world now where nostalgia is such a huge part of our culture that I think anything from the past is going to be, oh, that's awesome, it's cool. So, I still think that Hayden Christensen is not a good actor. And I also think that he didn't do well in the prequels, but it's nice to see the fans kind of embrace him a little bit. I think that more than anything, the Clone Wars as a show did a lot to smooth things over. So I think that's the area, that's the thing that I think really helped bridge the gap, is that the Clone Wars was done so well that it really made us it smoothed over a lot with the prequels and a lot that went wrong with the prequels. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's not the same kind of hostility towards those movies. I think the sequel trilogy had its problems. So yeah, I think that at this point, and I think that the first few minutes where they were just doing like a, hey, here's what happened in the prequels, in case you didn't know, they actually made the prequels look pretty good, in that little brief period. But yeah, I think at this point, like, I don't think it should be, or we need to have the same kind of hate that was there for the prequels initially.
Well, not only that, the prequels now spoke to another generation of fans. So that those are their movies compared to 4, 5, and 6 being IG and my movies. So, I mean, hats off to Dave Filoni for kind of adding to the lore of Star Wars with Clone Wars. And it's interesting that you bring up nostalgia, because I remember back in the day when you wore a jersey, if that person was no longer on the team, you were a nerd. Like, oh, what are you wearing that old jersey for? Get somebody that's on the team. Now it's called Throwback, and it's cool as hell. And there's bands out there that should have went away 20 years ago, but they're still touring on the strength of one song. And that, I mean, when that fire happened in the venue with White Snake and hundreds of people, got hurt or killed, I was just as upset about the fire, but I was more surprised that there were 100 people seeing Whitesnake. That that people are still coming out to see those bands. But it happens, and I'm a fan of nostalgia as well.
Now is when Cinik hides his next tour date with Right Said Fred.
Oof, I am too sexy for this podcast. Kim, Ewan McGregor really seems to love playing this character. Whenever he speaks about it, he absolutely glows. Does that, as a viewer, add to your enjoyment of the program when you know that the person that's acting the role is actually enjoying what they're doing?
I think it helps to kind of draw you in and make a connection with that character. Like you said, it's a whole new generation. It's a whole new audience of people. So when you see somebody that's not just like, I don't want to say method acting, but they're really kind of channeling that character and that history of the character and how significant it is to such a massive franchise, and they're just enjoying the heck out of it. It reconnects the audience. So if there was any kind of disconnect, I mean, you say 20 years ago, I think 2010, but you say 20 years ago, people were with the those 3 movies that came out, and now I'm sitting here and I'm looking at this and I'm like, oh, I love this again. I light it up like a Christmas tree whenever I see them lighting up like a Christmas tree and just really just going all in on their characters. It's amazing.
Well, like Ryan said, we opened to a great montage. I mean, it was great, and we get kind of an episode. We get to see Ben's exile on Tat, which I didn't see covered before other than a 2013 novel, which was fun, by John Jackson Miller. Did any of you guys read it? Okay. Ryan, did you read it or no? Ryan, you're muted.
Sorry, I'm muted. I read it. It was I can tell you I liked it, but I also read it in 2013, so I don't remember much.
Exactly. I brushed back over it when they announced the Obi-Wan program, and I was kind of hoping that maybe they would draw from some of that source material. But now that we've entered into a Star Wars where we have woke sand people, we can't do that because they were basically the main villain of the book. So, we can't go back and make them bloody savages after we spent a whole season of Boba Fett making them, relatable. So that wasn't going to happen. But the book is good. I mean, it's no longer canon once Disney took it over, but it's still a lot of fun and worth a read. Ryan, one of the things I love most about these projects is it brings depth of character. You don't really think about these little things. I have to be honest when I say I considered living on Tat, and it must suck, right? But I never took the time to think what happened to Obi-Wan after episode 3. Like, where did he end up as a person? Because, I mean, did you consider yourself like he lost his standing in the galaxy, he lost all his coworkers, he lost his job, and he killed his best friend? Did you ever take the time to go, okay, what happened to that guy afterwards that we don't find him again until episode 4?
I mean, yes and no, because that there's obviously there's this huge gap between the end of Revenge of the Sith and the beginning of A New Hope. So there's this long gap, and you wonder, okay, what's his life like to be this kind of hermit? So I do think it's interesting, although at the same time, no matter what you create in your head, content will make it a lot more exciting. The need for content is going to make it a lot more exciting and more interesting than maybe you even want it to be. So, I think the only fear is that, okay, he's a guy with a singular mission, which is to, basically wait for, protect Luke and wait for him to show force powers and train him. And there is that fear that, between comics and video games and TV, that they're going to have these adventures that will diminish what we do get in A New Hope and diminishes the character that he is in that movie. So I think there is a part that does wonder what he did, but you almost hope that a lot of it was just being a hermit on Tatooine, waiting for Luke to get older and develop force powers.
Well, Kim, other than and you're a big fan of the internet, other than a few cleverly placed memes about how hard 16 years was on old Ben, I mean, did you ever give a thought of what happened in these 16 years to this guy?
Yes and no. You sit there and you kind of wonder what's the gap. And anytime a new episode comes out, a new spin-off, a new prequel, whatever, I always kind of play that placement game in my head of where does this fit in the grand scheme of everything. And so it usually doesn't dawn on me until I'm actually watching. Like my husband and I were having this conversation the other night, and I said, "Okay, so is this between like 3 and 4? Like what's can we properly place this?" And then it was within a few seconds it recapped everything, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't even realize that there was such a large gap, and here they are just filling in a storyline that I never even fathomed was something I knew I need or didn't know I needed to know."
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. IG, for the casual fan, what do we know about Alderaan, right? Leia was from there. Cara Dune was from there. It got blown up the first time we saw it on screen. But we're both video game nerds, and we played a game called Star Wars Old Republic. It's a fun MMO. It's still around if you want to try it. And we got to share the air of the now defunct planet. At least from the video game terms or the standards that they set, what do you think about the recreation of Alderaan?
I actually loved the recreation of Alderaan. It made it look like, a very peaceful, serene, green, like forested planet that is still very civilized, right? That's almost like, the upper echelon people are going to be from there, right? That's where your rich people move when they become rich, or the old money lives there because that's just what it seems like. But at the same time, they take their education and their manners and their decorum and everything very seriously. And it really kind of resonated with me, especially like knowing that, because when you first watched A New Hope, as you and I did when we were very young, you didn't have any idea that Leia was Luke's sister, Vader's daughter, any of that. She was Leia. She was a senator from Alderaan. And based on how she even acted under the worst of circumstances, because, it wasn't real happy being abducted by Vader and brought to Tarkin, she still, had a very sharp tongue and still held herself with very distinct poise. So, seeing that, turn around and getting to see the planet and what it looks like and how the people are dressed and how they move and walk and everything, I think it was very, very well done.
Yeah, I agree with you. It kind of had a Swiss Alps feel to it. The people were very rich and affluent, and I kind of just made me happier that the planet got blown up in retrospect, because I don't think I would like any of those people outside of Leia or Bail Organa. Ryan, you being a big Clone Wars fan, outside of the Darth Vader tease, it looks like at the end of Episode 2, the show introduces the first live-action version of the Inquisitors. For people who aren't familiar with them, please explain their role in the Star Wars universe.
I think the Inquisitors were from Rebels. Like, they were kind of introduced in Rebels, but then they've kind of found their way into video games and into the comics. And they basically they're there to hunt Jedi. Like, that's their job. And then so some of them are, they're force sensitive. Some of them are Jedi that have been turned. But yeah, that's their it was really cool. It's really cool to see them. It's weird. I wasn't sold on the visuals when I saw the trailer, but I really loved the portrayal of like the Grand Inquisitor and the ones that we've seen. The Reva, who seems to be the main antagonist so far. She wasn't a character from the Clone or from Rebels, but the others, it was really cool to kind of see a live action version, and I was sold in the performances. So I was it's really cool to see. I mean, that's the thing with the great thing about the shows is you have all these, between Rebels and the Clone Wars, you have all these characters that are really interesting and that you want to see a live action version. And so far they've like knocked it out the park with them. From Cad Bane to these guys, to Ahsoka, to the Inquisitors. Like, they're doing a great job with it, and it was really cool to see them and how they're portrayed.
Well, based off of what we heard from Celebration, it sounds like Ahsoka is going to be a lot of live-action recreation from Rebels. Like, I'm actually really excited for it. I mean, I didn't love Rebels to start. By the end of it, I was as big a fan as anybody else.
Yeah, by like season 2, 3 of Rebels, it was fantastic. Once they really started to tie into like the Clone Wars and bring, there's some stuff in Rebels that's among the best stuff in Star Wars.
Kim, I mean, there's obviously friction between Lars and Kenobi. He's told him by no uncertain circumstances and to stay away. But even when his life was in jeopardy, why do you think he didn't turn the Jedi in?
I don't know. Honestly, we sat there and you start recanting old banter and conversations and stuff like that from um, previous drama in your head, and we had difference of opinions for that. Part of me says it's just deeply embedded in his DNA of being a Jedi, that's just not something you do. You don't turn your back on each other. The other part of me says maybe he's just completely given up, entirely, and just doesn't want to have to deal with it. That's a lot of bureaucratic mess that, maybe just doesn't want to be part of. I don't know. There's a couple of different um, ways that could go. And honestly, I'm kind of excited about seeing what happens in the third episode, because I feel like there's a lot of things that are kind of trailing off into like a large buildup, and I'm very excited to see it.
Yeah, I agree with you. IG's parting words were, "I didn't do it for you." Why do you think he didn't know? What do you think he was talking about?
It could be any number of things, but I hate to venture a guess at it at this point, just because so many different things can come out of that. But man, I don't know. Like there was probably a bad question to ask me at that time, because I was trying to get my dogs to be quiet.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you what.
Go ahead.
I think that. I think there's a part of him that, like, he as much as he does not want Luke to be caught up in everything, I think he respects the Jedi and does believe in I think believes that they have what's best for the Empire now, the Republic in mind. But I also think he's doing basically a mental calculation. If he doesn't say anything, he's calling her bluff. And hopefully she's just bluffing and she doesn't do anything, because for all she knows, he's just some random guy. Granted, she just chopped somebody's hand off, but I think she knows, like, okay, he's just a random guy. Maybe she won't do anything to him. If he gives up Obi-Wan, then questions get asked. Well, why? How does he know? And does Obi-Wan? And at the end of the day, he's doing it for Luke. If she kills him, maybe Luke survives. If she gives up Obi-Wan, it's gonna get back. So I think that he's doing it. I think it's a mental calculation he's playing of like, he's playing the odds at that point and hoping that she's bluffing. If he gives
Obi-Wan up, I think he's dead too. I think she puts the saber through him, and then they go and they engage with him. Based off the previews, IG, we see a young Luke and Leia prominently displayed in the trailers. Now, as next animation, what's near and dear to me are child actors. So, like Carl from The Walking Dead, young Leia suffers from the rare condition that's called "can't stay in the fucking house." Was the kidnapping trope visible from a mile away? And do you think her over-the-top mature personality was maybe a little bit too much?
Well, I think the kidnapping was like telegraphed a little bit, because they had to get something, because we saw in the trailer other planets. Well, something's got to happen to get Obi-Wan off of Tatooine. I didn't know what it would be, but then when they start showing Leia, I'm like, something's going to happen with her. He's leaving because of her. As soon as I saw that they were on and there's Bail, which means Leia's there, that's going to happen. It's every show with those kind of things. I mean, Carl from The Walking Dead, stay in the fucking house, right? Now it's Leia, stay in the house. Like, you're supposed to be in the house going and apologizing to your cousin. Nope, I'm going to run outside and go where I'm not supposed to be. But if anybody gets a pass on that, it's Leia, because she always kind of flew by her own beat, did her own thing. And, even the mouth, like, she was sharp as a kid, but, we see her later, she's still got that sharp tongue. She's going to say things and do as she pleases, because she's kind of been empowered to do so. I think that's part of the being raised by the Organas, who are important people in the galaxy. You get an education that lets you do some of those things. And I think without even knowing, she's very perceptive with the Force to know that, like, when she was talking about her cousin, it's just like, you're scared because these things and those things. That just made me think that was her Force connection, giving her that insight. Because that's something, Yoda did that a lot, I sense much fear in you, So it kind of led into some of that.
I agree. It could have been just good vibes or a good read on or it could have been the Force. I did like that she was very Padme-like. That when she was leading Obi-Wan around, like, we're just going to do this and we're going to do that. I did like that a lot. I've softened on that since The Walking Dead as well. I mean, Judith kind of turned me on child actors as far as them being fun to kind of be in charge. I want them to be more than just drama points or backtalk. I want them to have like a fully fleshed character, and I think they kind of did that with Leia. I mean, being a Star Wars mark, of course, I'm going to like any version of Leia that they throw at us because it's just more content and it fills in the blanks a little bit more. Kim, the princess kidnapping. The princess was kidnapped and taken to, I believe it was a planet called Dayu, which looked a lot like Hong Kong, right? And I'm probably going to get this wrong, but we were greeted by the great and powerful Hija Estri. Am I close?
That's close.
Yeah.
Well, what is it? Say it.
You talking about Kumail Nanjiani's character?
Yeah. I think Haja and
I don't know, but even if you Google it, it has a question mark next to his character name because I don't even think Google knows how to properly say it.
But did the whole scene with the remotes and the magnets and the tomfoolery as far as being a Jedi, did it have very Wizard of Oz vibes to you?
It did, and I love Kumail Nanjiani. He just kind of has this almost like he wants to be serious, but the presence that he kind of gives off is that of a jokester. I don't know if that's just because I've seen a lot of his comedy or what, but so as soon as he walks in, very first thing I notice is that phony baloney lightsaber. It's hanging out. You're not supposed to have that out just for the whole world to see. So I knew that the gig was up. But to sit there and just collect credits or coins from innocent people who don't know any better and they're just desperate for help, a mom and a son, and to just, I don't know, all the wizardry and the showmanship and whatnot, and he was perfect for the role. If that's the ambiance that they were wanting to give off, I think they probably casted the absolute perfect person for that.
To his defense, though, he did get them off planet, right?
Yes.
He got them a flight. So, yeah. I mean, he may have charged a fee or something, but they may not have had any other way to get off
But was
planet
that out of
doing
guilt because he was questioned about it from Obi-Wan?
No, he was sending them to him anyway. They were on their way.
Yeah, I think the Jedi stuff is just showmanship to pull people in, maybe to charge more.
So lame.
It was funny, but at the same time, I feel like he's kind of being typecast into that same role because it felt like he was kind of the same character in the Eternals and every other place that he pops up. They're just kind of playing on that aspect of his character. Ryan, you can pick your friends, but unfortunately, most of the time, you can't pick your coworkers. Unless you have 10,000 jobs like Ryan George. Reva, the third sister, and the Grand Inquisitor just couldn't get on the same page about Kenobi living in Reva's head rent-free. Were you surprised by her betrayal? And do you think that this grudge she's carrying might be a little more personal and not just influence-driven?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, that was... first, I love her. I think she's great. Like, I think it's awesome having a villain like that. She's great. I love that she's the primary antagonist. I hope that it doesn't, shift too much to Vader. Obviously, we're going to get Vader in this, but I really think she's great. Badass. She's clearly obsessed, and there's got to be more to it. It'd be disappointing if it was just like she's just doing it to kind of get some favor with Vader. Like, there's got to be some reason for it. So yeah, I'm excited to see where that goes. I think she's great, and it was a shock that she killed the Grand Inquisitor, or I'm assuming she killed the Grand Inquisitor. But that came out of nowhere, and it's like, okay, she means business, and I love that. Like, I think it's like that's a formidable foe, like somebody who's hell bent on it, and will do whatever she has to do to get him. So I really hope that they're able to follow that up with a reason that makes sense and really makes us feel like, okay, I understand why she's doing it. Because now so far it's just like, why like you said, right, like why does she live rent free or why does he live rent free in her head? Like, it's a little crazy, but so far I'm sold.
Now, Ryan, being the huge Rebels fan that you are, you should know that the Grand Inquisitor's probably not dead.
Wait. Oh yeah, you're right. Unless it's a different Grand Inquisitor, like not even like
Probably not dead,
Probably
because they
not.
aren't going to destroy that timeline, because
Yeah.
Rebels
No,
is
you're right. No,
canon.
fair enough. Yeah.
And if you look back at
There's
like
this-
Book of Boba Fett, she got shot right in the midsection. She should have
Yeah.
died. Take to a mod shop, you're all fixed up, good to go. So
Yeah.
I mean, just a little lights. It's nothing worse than getting a blaster through the midsection. We'll take you over here, throw a little
Yeah.
electronics in you, you're good to go.
When Obi-Wan shows up in Rebels, it's like after this point, right? Like the point that we
Well
see.
after.
Yeah, he's
Well,
an old
yeah.
man. He's gray beard, the whole deal.
I mean, but that's weird. But then it's weird because Luke's still like, Luke's maybe 5 years older than he is now. Because like, if Luke and Leia are 10 in that, like, because Leia shows up in Rebels and she's like 16 or 17, so it can't be that. But I mean, that's the issue that we have.
That's still later.
10 years later, he becomes like, he ages 30 years. But I mean, not really, because like, I mean, what's his name? Ewan McGregor just looks, better at that age.
He's pretty close to what
Yeah.
Alec Guinness was when he started episode 4 right now.
Yeah. So, but it's still, yeah, you're right. Like so he must be alive, but I'd be interested to see how they keep him alive. But yeah, this is Star Wars. Anybody can, unless their head's chopped off, they're probably still alive.
Kim, despite the kidnapping being important enough for the good senator to potentially out the exiled Jedi, rob Luke of his one and only guardian, but not important enough to lend Ben any of his vast resources. What were your thoughts on the first 2 episodes and your combined rating?
I thought that there was a couple little scenes that maybe had some continuity issues. I really wasn't understanding why he would Obi-Wan, why he was leaving, where he was chopping up the meat. He'd get on that train, they'd go all the way across the desert just for him to get on a camel and head right back to where he just came from. Kind of confused me a little bit. So Disney's infamous for putting filler scenes in. So we saw that a lot with The Mandalorian and whatnot. However, that being said, that was really my only chief complaint. And I love the fact that they put little Easter eggs in there, like when Obi-Wan went to go bend over to say, "I'm here to help you," to Princess Leia. It was the same way that Princess Leia had, in
New Hope.
thank you, that she had leaned over, and like they said on New Rockstars, same glow, same intensity. It was just like mirroring that moment and how intense it was. And the girl that gave the spice to Obi-Wan is actually Ewan McGregor's daughter. And so there was all these little things that just kind of, I don't know, between the characters really just getting into it. I felt that there was more to this than probably Mandalorian, but that's just my personal opinion. I absolutely loved watching this, and I'm so excited to see what happens next. So for me, if it's like a 9 out of 10, I'm super excited about it.
Ryan? You're muted.
Yeah, so I really I really enjoyed it. I think of the 3 shows, like of Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett, and Obi-Wan, I think this has gotten off to the best start. It's clear in like what the story is, where it wants to go. Seems like it's almost like directed and written almost more confidently than either one of those were at the start. I still think Mandalorian's amazing, but I do like how it started. I love the characters. Obviously, Ewan McGregor's great as Obi-Wan and still great here. Kind of playing this character who's beaten up and who is maybe is unsure of himself. That the scene at the end where he just finding out that Vader is Anakin is he's great. I mean, his performance has been awesome, and a great extension of what what was one of the better parts of the prequel trilogy. I think the young Leia is really good. She's kind of sassy. Maybe they wrote her about 5 or 10% too intelligent and too witty. Like we don't know many 10-year-olds like that. But again, it's Leia, and so I can buy that, and she's great. And, it's kind of great seeing Bail Organa. The whole thing. It just works really well. I love the speaking of cameos and random people in it flee. As one of the villains was amazing. To see that was cool. But no, I really liked it. I love the story. Again, I think the Inquisitors. It was great to see them. I think Riva is a great addition and a formidable foe. And I think as the person trying to chase him, I think that's awesome. So I think it's off to a great start. I would give these first 2 episodes a solid 8.5. Like, really good, really excited to see where the show is. And I was excited to see it, as we all were, but seeing what the story is and where they're going, I really can't wait to see the next episode.
IG.
First let me touch on Kim, riding on the train and then going back the same way. Well, all the dunes look exactly the same on Tatooine. He could have rode the train in and gone out the other side. It looks exactly the same as going back the way you came.
I'm just judging by the entrance and exit scenery.
It's all like he could be taking a hard left too. Like, who knows where he's going? Because, I can't tell the difference between Mos Espa and Mos Eisley most of the time looking at the stuff. So, it's Tatooine. And that being said, starting on Tatooine and spending a good amount of time there and everything did one thing for me. And what it did is it made it very, very familiar. But then they spent a lot of time making things feel very new as well. So having those things kind of pulling me together from both sides, because I want new Star Wars, but I love familiar Star Wars. And that's what we're getting here. And that's the strongest point that they're getting to, right? You get to see Luke off in the distance. We didn't get to talk to him, but we got to talk to Uncle Lars, Owen Lars. So we got a little bit that way. And then all of a sudden, there's Bail Organa again. And Leia. We get Leia. Who saw that coming? I did not see that coming, that we were going to get Leia. I knew we were going to get something important, because there's no way you're pulling Ben off of Tatooine without something very important. But I did not get that it was going to be Leia. I'm very excited about the possibilities that they can do with this. Now, I don't know that they're going to do further seasons of this. This might be a one and done kind of 6-episode arc, and that's it. But so far, the writing and the production value and just how everything looks and everything, if this is all we get 6 episodes that are all 45 minutes to an hour each. That's not plenty, but I'll take it, because it's just really well done. Deborah Chow has knocked it out of the park with the first 2 episodes. And I didn't expect out of the 6 for my highest scores to be the first 2. So I'm sure that I will probably end up with a 10 somewhere. These are good. I don't think they're quite 10, but I will give them a 9. I really did enjoy it. And again, just like I said, it's familiarity and newness thrown together to give us just something special.
That's a very conservative grade for you.
I know.
I absolutely enjoyed these 2 episodes. The combined rating for me is most definitely a 9. I'm right there with IG. Ewan McGregor kills it as the traumatized, world-weary post-prequel Kenobi. I like the fact that they took him off-world. I'm sure people will still complain about Tatooine hangover, and it's too much, and I don't care. I love Tatooine. I would stay there for every show, every movie. It's just my favorite planet. Young Leia was a lot of fun, and I hope we get a chance to kind of spend some time with Luke, if not a little bit over the top. The show was well paced, it was fun to watch, and the Inquisitor arc should be really interesting moving forward. The only bad part is we only have 4 episodes left. So right now it's right up there with The Mandalorian as far as my favorite Disney Plus vehicle, and I can't wait for more. All right, folks, maybe it's been too long since I've done this. Maybe I'm just angst-ridden, but I'm going to let you know I'm going to do a thing now. And if you don't want to hear me climb up on my soapbox, you want to head on out the back. So I'll give you a second. So, I was at work the other day, and the guys in the break room were debating the merits of the club members sleeping with Coco's daughter on Mayans. Most surprisingly, the majority of them were pro. They all wanted to sleep with Coco's daughter. I looked at the only other rational coworker in the room, and I said, spoken like a bunch of guys who don't have daughters. In other words, they lacked point of reference. Which leads me to the recent events, and I'll do my best. We all do our best here on Cinik Radio to stay out of the political arena and just keep it light and fun. But I bring up Coco's daughter Because the top 15% of this country will probably not know what it's like to send their kids to school and for them to never come home. Because the people we choose to run our country and decide our laws are extremely wealthy. Now, I don't begrudge anyone for doing better financially than I am. Most of them have earned it. But what I do take issue on is when people sit on their hands in this country while it's being shot apart by guns. Because campaign contributions mean more than children's lives. Don't get me wrong. I'm pro Second Amendment. Before you call me a snowflake, before you shrug this off as partisan rantings, I believe at some point, every sane, rational individual will probably have to carry some sort of gun for self-defense. Emphasis on rational and sane. The rights afforded to us because of the Second Amendment aren't a blanket information for us to have enough arms in our possession to take over a small country. These mass shootings happen so often, it's literally hard to keep track of them. But folks, it's only happening here. It's not only monthly, but it's almost become a weekly occurrence, and it stings the most when it's aimed at kids. So here's your point of reference in case you're having trouble getting there. Imagine your kid, or a kid you know, being forced to cover themselves in blood and laying motionless, pretending to be dead to try to escape execution at school. When everybody's favorite person in the world, Ted Cruz, was asked, why does this only happen here? He waved the "this is still the greatest country in the world" flag and fled the interview. But is it? I mean, post-World War II, it might have been. But when women don't have say over their reproductive rights, and when your children aren't safe at school, and when churches and supermarkets become targets, how do we continue to fool ourselves with that statement? There is a common sense way to govern. Abortion, gun control, they aren't as simple as yes or no, or red or blue. Stop allowing our future to be snuffed out one bullet at a time. Demand background checks. Demand common sense gun legislation, and most of all, demand that these bought and paid corrupt lawmakers, both blue and red, it's time for term limits. 21 lives this time. Most of these people were children. We sit here with no answers and no closer to a solution than we were the last time this happened, or the time before that. And this is the greatest country in the world, right? Until next time, don't get shot by a psychopath.
Follow the podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and at cinicradio.com. Available for download on iTunes.